Chapter 2, Part 5. This is going to be a long one. I apologize, but this is a big chapter. So we talked about atmospheric perspective, and this was a great example where things get fuzzy in the distance and they're focused and detailed in the foreground. Foreground, middle ground, background. Okay. Also, you see a bluing. Now this isn't the very best image for this, but what we're looking through is the atmosphere. Pretend like the clouds are between us, where we're standing here perhaps, and these hills back here. See how that's slightly bluer? Some images you can see it better, some paintings rather, you see it better, and you see the blue of the blue sky in the back, but things get fuzzy because of the moisture in the atmosphere. Linear perspective, I'm not going to get into all this stuff because we don't really go into this as much as we do the other things like texture and color. But there's a vanishing point. Now, in Renaissance art, which painting really gets developed at that time, they start to use these concepts quite a bit. This is single point perspective here, where everything in the image, and if you look at Leonardo da Vinci's Last Supper, everything vanishes to one point, okay? All these edges, if you look at this edge, it's easier a little bit over here. This edge is going to go all the way here. So we're looking down perhaps a hallway, and these would be structures in our hallway. They're going to all go straight down. That's the easiest way to explain that. Two vanishing points. This is 2-point perspective because we have 1, 2 vanishing points. And the horizon line is here in all of these cases, and the horizon line determines how things look. Now, we know this box is somewhat above the horizon line because we can't actually see. This is an interior line that we don't actually see, but this is bigger here, and then it's going to get smaller as it goes here to the vanishing point. And again, this point here ends at that vanishing point. This box is below the horizon line, and we see that how the lines travel. It's a little bit hard to understand at first, and we'll look at a couple examples. This is 3-point perspective, 1, 2, 3, and this would be very unusual. This doesn't occur too many times. You'd either have to be an insect looking up at a building, or you would be a bird sort of floating over it. It happens in nature a little bit like a cereal box, perhaps, on a table. But for the most part, you're not going to get into 3-point perspective the way you're going to see things. Okay, 1 point, we just talked about this. They recede to a single. 1 point, again, is this. And this is confusing to you because you don't understand what this diagram is. This is how 1-point perspective was developed. And he's got this sort of instrument here where he's focused so he knows he's in the same position at all times. He doesn't move this. And he's got this grid here that matches this grid here. And you can grid out any kind of a drawing or scene. You can do it from a live model, but you can also do it from a photograph and then grid it out and draw it that way. And then you develop your perspective. But what we're looking at as well, that's kind of the wild thing, is that we're looking at a 1-point perspective. It's all vanishing. If you see this line and that line, it's all vanishing out here, if that makes sense. This line's going out there. The end of this table, which we can't really see, would end up going out there. Okay, 2-point, again, there's 2 vanishing points. 3-point. So this is kind of a fun piece, and it's a just an abstract piece. It's got boxes, but it's just beautiful colors. I just love this. I think it's a really gorgeous piece, and I've had students replicate this when I teach a different class. They replicate famous paintings. Anyway, you really kind of can see how this box is disappearing into this point. See how all these points are going here? So it's going off there. It's also going off here. See, that second point is here, going off here. So the actual points would be off the canvas. They'd be here, and this one would be way back here somewhere. And then the third one, you actually can see it. I don't know how straight that is, but anyway, that's the third one down there. Isomeric, a little confusing. I'm not going to worry too much about this. It's in their architectural drafting, but you're drawing it at a 30-degree angle so you can kind of see everything, if that makes sense. Oblique, this is also same kind of thing. Look at this, is pretty much the same as that, but you're getting different views of it. And this helps you to draw this piece. So you're going to have a 45-degree angle here, and it's going to go out straight, more or less, so that you can see inside of it. All right, so oblique perspective is here, and I'm forgetting. I think it's oblique is the one for video games. You have this weird thing where you're seeing everything kind of going off into the distance, but you're also seeing all the objects in it. So it gives you a sense of space going back from the lower right to the upper left. Multi-point perspectives, remember we looked at this one for space a little bit, but this is a surrealist piece, so it makes it hard here because it's not, its ambition is not to replicate reality. It is to take reality and tweak it. So it's going to give an unreal or illogical depiction of space. That's worded really, really well. So if you look here, this has kind of got one type of perspective. This is operating, see how this vanishing point is going down here, that vanishing point is going off here toward that train cloud. So it's got multi points, so it's giving you a sense of unreality. It sort of gives you, not seasickness, but it's sort of a little bit like, ooh, this seems wrong. Okay, so we talked about space a little bit. We talked about shapes. I beg your pardon. So space a little in sculpture and architecture. That's really when it happens. Space doesn't really happen in a painting. It's mostly in a three-dimensional object, and it's the footprint occupied by the structure, and it's also the voids and solids within each piece and immediately surrounding it. Okay, so remember we talked about negative space, positive space, negative space. And this has basically a lot of negative space, but we don't really talk about it in those terms. It's just the space that is occupying. Because if you had a shelf, you would still need enough footing for those 4 wheels, and you would have to have enough depth to hold it. So it does take up space, even though, again, it doesn't have a lot of mass. This has a lot of mass. It's chunky, it's thick, it's solid. Okay, so space and installation or performance art can be particularly significant because part of the meaning comes from the environment. So a site-specific piece, which this is a replica of an American spy plane from the middle of the body of the tail, and this is placed in this area of town, so it's changing the meaning. It's a different context. This is not at the airport, right? It's not at a crash site. It is cut off. It's not a whole plane anyway, and it's put into a cityscape. So this is installation. Time and motion. This is a little bit tricky, but this is the passage from virgin to bride. So this is supposed to be multiple time periods in one piece. Motion, same thing, like there's walking here. I know this is highly abstracted and it's a little difficult to see, but there is motion. Mostly motion is not in a painting. It's mostly in kinetic work, but there can be some motion in two-dimensional work. Okay, I'm going to stop here.